Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, everyone, to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Jennifer Keegan, Director of Building and Roofing Science at GAF. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you, Caitlin. This is fun. I'm excited to be here.
So Jennifer and I actually met at the AIA Women's Leadership Summit in Boston and got to hang out there and get to know a little bit more about what you're doing. And so I was super excited to reach out to you with the podcast arm that I do and sharing your story and all the really cool projects and work you're doing. So I always start out the questions with kind of the more loaded one, just to give people a little bit more background on your career. So do you mind explaining a little bit on kind of your education background and how you got to this point in your career?
Sure. So I thought I wanted to be an architect, so I went to school for architecture. And at the same time, I was being suggested to go into engineering because I was really good at math and science. But at 17, I had absolutely no idea what that meant. So I took classes in both, figured I'd pick one. But I loved engineering. I couldn't let go of my architecture dream, even though it was, I struggled in my studio classes. And I graduated with 2 degrees, and I had all these really cool interviews, and I was like, I definitely don't want to do either of these. And so I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have all this debt, I have these 2 degrees, and I don't know what I want to do with my life. And luckily, I was suggested that I do an interview with WJE, Worcester Announcement, and I absolutely loved it. And I was like, this is what I want to do. It was lifetime problem solving. It was out in the field. I wasn't at a desk. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I was really fortunate to spend my first 10 years at WJE. I worked on all existing buildings. I did a lot of forensic work. So I learned how buildings failed, and I learned how to repair them. So I kind of learned all the what not to do's and how to do it right. And then life became really challenging when I had 2 small children and trying to hold down a consulting gig, and I was working too many hours and I was really stressed. And one of my contractor clients was complaining about a specification that somebody wrote, and how is he supposed to know what was in here? And he said, what I really need is somebody like you to come work with me and help figure this out. And I said, that sounds really interesting. Tell me more. And so it was the right time to make a career shift, and it worked for my personal life. And so I shifted. I worked for a restoration contractor for a few years. And it didn't really help them as much with the project work like we had originally discussed. They kind of found this niche where I was actually more helpful to them in helping to rebuild burned bridges and rebuild some relationships with the consultant community and help them get some more project opportunities that way. So through that, I ended up doing a bunch of education and relationship building with the consulting community. And then the recession hit. This was back in 2008. And my family needed to relocate from California to the East Coast. And that's a terrible time to look for a job. So here I was going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And a friend of mine from college worked for Navigant Consulting, which is now Ankara. And she said, well, we're not hiring. We just unfortunately had to lay some people off, but my boss is really well connected in the Philly area. Why don't you have lunch with him and see what connections he can make? And by the time I was done lunch, I had a job offer and they created a position for me. I was super blessed. And so I went and worked for them. That was all construction defect litigation work. And so while I had learned so much and could do all of that work, I didn't love wearing that hat. I really loved a more collaborative environment and a less critical environment to work in. And so fast forward a few years and I had the opportunity to go work for Intertech. They were building out their building science practice. And it would allow me to take all that I had learned from failures and litigation and apply it to new construction. And so that seemed a lot more collaborative. I got to work with architects and owners on new construction projects and really help architects' designs function. And so I was kind of like, I'm behind the scenes. I'm just going to help make sure, manage your risk, keep you out of trouble. And so that was really fun. And I opened the Philly office, I opened the New York office, I was helping open the Boston office. I was working way too many hours. And
I was going to say, that starts to be a lot.
It was a lot. And just the commute to New York, it was like a 3-hour commute every day to like drive to the train station and then take the train and then take the subway. And it just got to be a lot. And it was really hard on my family. And my daughter was going through a lot and I really needed to be around more. And through my industry association work, I fell into an opportunity I never ever thought I would take. Never in a million years would have thought I would cross to the dark side of manufacturing and work for a product manufacturer. I would have bet hard money that I would never be in this position. But at an ASTM committee meeting, GIF approached me and said, we're looking at building this building science team. Would you be interested? And I said, well, gosh, I don't know. Let me think about it. And I haven't looked back since I made the change, and I absolutely love it.
And so when did you join their team?
Almost 6 years ago, 6 years in April.
Mm-hmm. But you're not the only one I know that I have interviewed that said they would never do something. And they had said that like early on, and then they end up going down that path.
Never say never.
Yeah. But backing up to some of your story, when you were helping the one company through mending burning bridges,
Mm-hmm.
what was some of the advice that you recommend to them, or what advice would you give somebody else that needs to repair some relationships?
You know, at the end of the day, if you simplified it all the way down, it always came back to communication.
Mm-hmm.
Always. And so from the contractor's perspective, this was scenarios where they would provide a bid to a consultant, but they would have so much work that they really couldn't take it on. So they would provide them with like this astronomical number that was just really unrealistic. Or they would just not respond and they just wouldn't submit a bid. And had they just said, look, we're too busy, we can't take this on, here's the scenario, they could have had a conversation about it and not burnt a bridge. But instead, they were like, the consultant felt, well, you just screwed me over. And how am I going to manage this project now? And now the owner's mad at me because I didn't get 3 competitive bids. And it could have all been resolved just with an honest line of communication.
Yeah. And that would go for like architects and design teams too. Sometimes we're already stretched too thin and a repeat client comes back with more work, but you just accepted a big job and it's your full staff and you don't have the staff to do them a service that they deserve. But sometimes people are afraid to say no or afraid to get back to them. So either I've seen it more on the contractor side, receiving bids, where if some bids are really high, then it's like, okay, are my drawings actually that bad? Because if the bids are
Right.
coming in at a closer number, then I'm more proud of myself as an architect and be like, okay, like I communicated my design well enough that they all understood it, comparing it between companies. I may still miss something, but it's better. But if you got the crazy outliers, it's like, did I mess up or are you crazy outbidding it just to at least show a bid? So, no, but always communication. I feel like that's always a common thread in the industry on how to improve. So, what does the building science department at GAF do?
So we get to do all the fun stuff that I did while I was consulting, but now it's with by getting to partner with architects and specifiers, and we really have. I kind of look at us as a three-legged stool, right? So we lead with education, we provide project support, and we have a ton of industry engagement and involvement. And so feel like that really gives us such a stable foundation, right? Our industry involvement, yes, it helps with relationships, but it also helps us stay in the know on what the trends are, the issues, the concerns, what are the problems people are facing, what are people talking about, what are the questions they're asking, what are the questions they're not asking. And that really helps us make sure that what we're bringing forward is relevant. I feel like always leading with education is, you should share what you know. And I always learn something by teaching others. So how did you hear that? How did you receive it? Well, what are you seeing that I'm not? And let's solve that problem together. And then with the project support, I mean, gosh, that's what me and my team have been doing. I've been in the industry for 26 years now, and most of my team is somewhere in that 15 to 20 year range. Um, we get to do that with project teams and just kind of be that sounding board. Come chat with us. Have you thought about this? Have you considered that? Heads up about risk associated with going down this path. And so it's a lot of fun to have those conversations and build those relationships.
Now, are you still looking at, like, when I think of on a product side, are you just looking at the products you guys sell, or are you also bringing in other products for like the whole like wall assembly system or full roof system when you're taking a look and helping architects?
Well, so GAF is a roof manufacturer. GAF, under the umbrella, C-Plast is a sister company. So C-Plast is largely roofs, waterproofing, and they also have a vertical wall waterproofing and insulation now. So that's all in our wheelhouse. But I fully believe that everything is so integrated that I can't solely talk about a roof membrane without talking about how that ties into all the other adjacent elements. So while my education is largely focused around the roof, it's very connected with, okay, so if I've got a parapet, how am I tying into that? If I've got a rising wall, how am I thinking about re-roofing without removing the cladding? How am I tying this in if I've got a single white masonry wall? What am I thinking about? How am I attaching that? All of those elements all come in. So I'm probably not going to help you detail your windows, but if you have a clerestory window that's coming into the roof, we're certainly going to talk about that and figure out how we manage that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's always those transitions,
Mm-hmm.
regardless if it's roof or wall, and it's trying to find the companies that will work together with multiple companies because it all gets built up and works together as a full system. So that's why I was kind of curious how you guys pull all that together, because I know I've had definitely walls that come up off a roof, and that's when that happened. I learned about the snowdrift and how much I need to keep a window up so we can roof it properly, so we can flash around the window and the roofing, and it's not a hot mess on top of each other and then not going to operate. And then that's where it's going to fail. And so there's so many different like connection points. So that's why I wasn't sure how far you
Or if your
guys
curtain
went.
wall flies by the roof,
Yeah.
what do you do there, right? So let's talk about those things. Those are the fun challenges you get to play with.
Yeah. And for the building science part, how did, try to think of the best way to ask this. Like how from your experience would someone else discover building science? Like, are there now education programs or something that like you see people major in now versus kind of your dual degree and building up?
Okay,
Like,
I see what you're asking. At first,
where are other people coming from for a building science, or if somebody wants to get on the technical side of envelopes and roofing?
gotcha. Okay. So there are, Canada is really great with building science programs. They're ahead of us in that capacity. They've always been ahead of us in terms of building sciences. They have a more severe climate, so they see things faster than we do here.
Mm-hmm.
So, like University of Waterloo is an amazing school that a lot of brilliant building scientists have come from. In the States, we see the ARC-E programs having a lot of positioning for building science careers, right? So I think of Cal Poly with their program there. And I think there are firms like the Wishdanis and the Simpson Gumperts and Hagers and such that really focus in that space. So that you're not going to learn all of those things in school, but you're going to learn the tools, the foundation, so that you can absorb and understand and learn those things once you start your career. Initially, I thought you were asking how do people learn about building science, and I was like, well, through failure. That's how we learn, right? We learn when things fail, and we say, oh crap, how do I not do that again? How do I avoid that mistake? So
Yeah,
yeah,
I always explain architects like pet peeves. I was like, if a senior architect has a pet peeve, that means they've been burned from that in the past, because that is the biggest lessons we learn and the costs associated with learning those lessons on a project. Then they don't want to do that mistake again. And so then it becomes like they're super nitpicky on it. So,
yes, it's brilliant. Um,
yeah.
we try and offer a lot of education on building science. Joe Stiebrick has a ton of education on building sciences, and a lot of it's available online. He hosts workshops. He's up in Westford, Massachusetts, so he hosts a lot physically up there, but he does travel around. And so there's a lot of good foundational resources. So that way, as an architect, you can be informed and know the right questions to ask. You don't need to know the answers necessarily, but if you know the right questions to ask, you kind of know what the red flags are. I think that's the best way as an architect to arm yourself.
Yeah. Have there been common themes that you see that people keep making similar mistakes?
I would say the biggest mistakes come in terms of condensation. So, which is almost always directly tied to airflow. So, the code requires the designer of record, which is very often the architect, to identify all the materials that contribute to the air control layer and detail all of those transitions and penetrations with the air barrier. You don't see that happening nearly as often as it should or could. And I find that it's often a misunderstanding or a lack of detailing in those, like you said, those transitions where assemblies come together is where the biggest risk comes. And that's where air leakage will happen, condensation comes, and then it kind of unravels from there.
Yeah. Because, like, we have a comm check, we do, but, like, nothing's like a code review analysis level of the envelope system. Like, it's anything with the envelope or condensation, it's all just high level stuff. And so I feel if people don't know what they're doing, it's a little bit easier to like squeak by the building department, and you don't actually like understand it if you're not have that fine-tuned eye for, hey, we really need to make sure this exact detailing makes sense.
I
So
would say if you ever had an opportunity to work on a project that requires building enclosure commissioning, your learning curve would be so steep. You would learn so much in a short amount of time, because when you commission a building enclosure, not just the mechanical equipment, but the enclosure, you're required to meet certain air tightness requirements. And once you do that, now there's somebody who's focused on all those details. And usually there's a peer review process involved in there. And that peer review process is done by a building enclosure consulting firm that knows what to look through in all those details. So they're going to zoom in to all of your details and nitpick the heck out of them and really show you where those vulnerable risks are. So if you ever have a project in your company that is building enclosure commissioning, I highly recommend volunteering to get involved with that project. And if that's not a possibility, ask that team to host an education session for the rest of the company afterwards and say, this is what we learned. And if you were part of it, man, put that program together for the rest of your firm. Because once you have to teach something to somebody, you learn it at such a deeper level. And it's not going to be like, oh, I got burnt on this project. It's going to be like, no, I lived it. I learned it. I was humbled by the red lines that were all over my drawings that I felt really proud of. But I learned so much from that process. And once you start sharing that knowledge, your learning just accelerates.
skyrockets.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge that you've faced specializing in kind of the building envelope roofing side?
There's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. So, where do you start? And it's kind of, at least in my career, it was, well, what projects did I have the opportunities to work on? And initially it was a bunch of waterproofing projects. So I learned a whole lot about waterproofing and plazas. But then, and that translates pretty well into roofing. So then I had some roofing projects and I learned about that. But then there's this vertical building in between. And so, but there's all these different elements, and there's different facade components. And is it a window? Is it a storefront? Is it a curtain wall? And they're all very different. Is there an eaves cladding? Is it metal panels? Is it concrete tilt up? Like, they all have their own nuances. And so it's really getting the exposure to as many different kinds of projects, which just takes time, and it takes time to learn. And so that was really frustrating for me for a while. I felt like I couldn't consume enough fast enough. Like it just, and then all of a sudden one day I realized, oh my gosh, I've actually worked on all these different kinds of projects and I've learned so much, but it was hard to be patient enough to get there. I think that was my biggest challenge.
And I think that's very common within the AEC industry itself, because there's so much to learn that you'll never know everything. But if you can have people and build relationships to connect to everybody, to know when to ask questions. So
Yes.
it's, now that I know you, it's like, oh, if I've got a roofing question, I may just call Jennifer. And even if you're busy, you'll send me over to your team and just help me out and help me get an answer that I need
Yes.
to do this correctly.
Let me help shorten your learning curve. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, on the opposite, what's the most rewarding side?
Ooh, the most rewarding. Um, I think it was when I realized one day that I was actually considered a subject matter expert. And, not that, because it's not that you know everything, it's just that you know more than the average person, and that I had some value to bring to a project, that I was able to influence a lot of projects in a positive direction to help other people mitigate their risks, and becoming that person that people trusted, that somebody like you would say, hey, I'm working on this challenging project and I wanted to run something by you. Like that to me that's the most rewarding thing, is when somebody calls me to say, I could really use your help. I value your opinion. Like, there's no bigger compliment to me.
Yeah. And now that you're on the manufacturing side, do you get any say or input on new products coming out?
Um, I do have a voice for sure. We actually have a meeting in a couple weeks, kind of talking about some new potential that we have and where do we want to take it, and what do we think the industry could benefit from? What do we think there's a market for? So it's fun to be part of those conversations. That's the newer end for me, but it's kind of cool to have a voice in that space.
Yeah, just things you've learned and can actually like make change in how we build things or what is offered next is always fascinating. So what types of projects do you work on? I know you're a director, so I don't know.
Currently or in the past?
Um, let's go with currently, and maybe we'll pick a favorite from your past.
Okay. So currently, let me clarify. When you say projects, do you mean like construction projects, or what is my day job projects look like? What do you mean by?
Let's go with day job projects.
Okay.
Originally, I thought building projects, but now I'm more curious on your day job projects.
Okay. All right. So I spent the past year really building out the building science team. Before, it was really me and Kristen trying to be accessible to all the architects in the United States, which is just not reasonable, sustainable at all. But
You
we
know,
were
two people divided by
50
millions of
states.
architects.
Yeah, no. But, we spent our time doing a lot of education, a lot of awareness that we were building this team, that we were here as a resource. And, people have to hear things, what do they say, 7 times before it really registers. So luckily, it takes all that time for people to realize that. And in the meantime, I was building the team. So by the time people were realizing that and ready to reach out, we've had this team in place for just over a year now. And I've got a team across the US that kind of focuses in different regions to be there to support architects and specifiers. So if they have a project question, if they say, well, how would I detail? I'm thinking about this for a detail, or I don't even know where to begin. It's an existing building connecting to a new one, or they have this crazy detail and I'm not really sure what to do with it. I need help with my specifications, or can you look at my spec and make sure I haven't built, anything silly in here, or do I have any risk? We get to help out with all of those kinds of things. We I spend a lot of time with industry associations and figuring out how we can be better partners. What can we bring to support? We create a ton of education, and it's all based on the questions that you guys are asking us about your projects. When we meet up with you at conferences, what are the pain points that you're facing? How can we help answer those questions? How can we help you engage with your clients and what their concerns and questions are, and kind of start feeding those sorts of things. So it's a lot of fun building the team, helping them engage with you, creating a bunch of education content, and really spending so much time with industry. I love my job. It is so much fun.
And I know you got to recenter your career multiple times around family and what's going on. Do you have any advice for somebody that may need to shift what they're doing because of something that's going on at home?
I'd say don't be afraid to pivot. I was terrified to make these changes, and I thought I thought maybe I was making a career limiting move in some of these
Mm-hmm.
changes. I mean, I had a mentor of mine from really early in my career when I made this shift to GIF call me up and say, I can't believe you're doing this. This is a career limiting move. Like this, like you'll never, I don't know what you're thinking. And he called me about 18 months later and said, wow, I owe you an apology. I didn't see what you saw. I didn't see the vision. And I think it's really great what you're doing. So it's in all of these scenarios. I mean, I wish I could say I had this brilliant strategy where I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this building enclosure thing and learn my foundations. Then I'm gonna work for a contractor and kind of see what that side's about. And then I'm gonna go. No, they were all opportunities that presented themselves to me. That while I was scared, I wasn't so afraid that I didn't raise my hand and say, okay, yeah, let's talk. And
Yeah.
I made decisions based on what worked for me and my family at that moment in time. And every time I did, I said, well, this is for this moment in time. I don't have to stay on this path for any given amount of time. Like I can change whenever that makes sense. And I think allowing myself that flexibility, that freedom, not saying like, well, if I do this, I'm kind of stuck in this space was helpful, in allowing myself to pivot. And while pivoting can be really scary, it's created some really amazing opportunities that I would have never encountered had I stayed the course, right? Had I been like, no, I'm going to architecture school. I'm going to be an architect. I'm going to take this job that sounds really unappealing to me. I'm going to be miserable for the first 10 years of my career. And then I'm going to I was really blessed to be able to create my own job descriptions at several points in my career and really build something from the ground up. Don't just lean into it. Lean into it. And if you need somebody to bounce these ideas off of, God, call me. Even if we don't know each other, call me. Like I love talking to people about their careers and understanding, well, what do you want to do? What's your long game? And say, well, let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about some steps that could help you get there. And let's see what that would look like and what fits where you are in this moment.
Yeah, because you had coffee and then had a job offer after for a job that didn't exist.
Yes, which is crazy, absolutely crazy, and so fortunate. But yeah,
Yeah. And switching gears a little bit, I know you are super involved in so many different organizations. Are there favorite ones? I know you've traveled so much over the last like month and a half that I think you hit so many organizations and conferences. Um, let's start unraveling some of those. I know Women in Roofing is probably the biggest one that I see you talking about on LinkedIn, if we want to start there.
sure. So that was fun. National Women in Roofing started back in 2016. And I was brought in pretty early on. And I was just, like, I was on a committee, I was on the education committee, because that is like at the core
Mm-hmm.
of my being. So I gravitate to the things that I'm really passionate about. And have just worked my way deeper and deeper into that association and ended up as the chair this year. So that's why you see so much from me on LinkedIn with National
Yeah.
Women in Roofing. And I'll say two things about it. One is that somebody invited me in. So I can't I can't overemphasize the importance of that. Invite somebody into whatever it is you're doing, whether it's an association, whether it's a study group, whatever that looks like for you. it is amazing how empowering it is to invite somebody to join you and to do something. Um, and then second is what you put in to an association. I promise you will get back in spades. I, and I do it because I get so much from it. I love the people that I collaborate with and I work with, and as much effort and work and blood, sweat, and tears you put in, it's unexpected how much you get back, and it's so rewarding. And it is the connections that you're able to make by being involved with associations. Um, and I will say that many of my association engagements have led to job and project opportunities. So really don't underestimate the power of getting involved with industry associations.
Yeah. I know when I was probably not even a year out of school, I had a mentor in my office bring me to a CSI event. And I've been to a number of CSI events, and a lot of people think it's just for spec writers. And I'm like, no, it's for anybody. And now I get to know product reps locally in my area, and when I need help, it's a lot easier for me to call somebody when I know them or I've met them. It's not as scary to reach out to whoever's on the website as the rep and you don't know who they are.
Right.
And a young professional, like feeling like you need to know everything and not trying to sound like an idiot on the phone, to be like, I know nothing, teach me this. um, Him inviting me to those made it a lot more accessible, especially to a young professional that may be unsure about where to get involved or who to get involved, or being the youngest person in the room, you know,
Mm-hmm.
different things like that. But
Very
and
true. Very true.
what fun initiatives do you have this year as chair?
So I actually just finished. We just had the National Women in Roofing Conference about 2 weeks ago, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was my swan song, as you would say. That was the end of my term, and I handed over the baton to Anna Anderson, who's now the incoming chair. So I'm the immediate past chair of National Women in Roofing. Um, but our biggest thing is defining our legacy projects this year.
Hmm.
And so it'll be exciting to see where that goes. We are fairly confident that it is going to be very focused on inspiring and engaging the next generation. And how do we get them excited about the construction industry? How do we get girls in middle and high school to start thinking about careers in our space? So I'm really excited to dig in and see what we can do with that.
Yeah, because I'm assuming you're doing manufacturing, trades, contractors, hitting everybody.
Yes,
Because the numbers are astonishing. I know it's what 40% of the trades will retire by 2030.
it's terrifying. We have a
And
massive labor shortage.
and so it's like, okay, you think buildings are expensive now, like the trades are
Right?
going to be in such short supply that you got to be able to find somebody to build the buildings to get
Very
them
true.
going. So,
Very
and then what other organizations have you been involved in?
Let's see. I'll try and do it alphabetically so I can think through them all. I'm really involved with AIA. They are tremendous partners, and I've been really grateful at how they've been bringing manufacturers into the conversation to really strengthen the relationship between AIA members and the building product managers. Um, and they really let me innovate at the conferences and really try new things and kind of push the envelope, if you will, in terms of our education and all of that. Um, BEC is the Building Enclosure Council that's through AIA, which, if you're thinking building science and building envelope, It's a really great group to get involved with, and they have a bunch of local chapters. Um, CSI, you mentioned, is I just got back from a CSI Master Spec Retreat event, which is really great. And some of them are independent specifiers, some of them are specifiers that work within large architectural firms or smaller mid-sized firms. And so those are really great in terms of understanding how we can be better partners and what you need and what your challenges are. And are you using SpecLink or SpecPoint? And where are you pulling your data from? And what is it you're looking for in terms of the next generation as we come forward? And they have some really great conferences. We'll be presenting in April at one of the regional conferences. It has a pirate theme, which I'm pretty excited to embrace.
Yeah, you gotta like rope in a pirate in some sense.
Well, so
Gotta title the slides or something.
oh, for sure. So the post that they put up for me, I think was it yesterday or this morning, was like a yo ho ho, and I was like, oh, here we go. We've got a Shiver Me Timbers course on continuous insulation that we're putting together, so that'll be fun. um, IIDEC is another great one for building enclosure, building science narratives. ASTM, sorry, I'm now out of alphabetical order, but standards development, which is, I got involved with ASTM really early, and it was actually really great connecting and networking that I've gained through that, as well as a really deep appreciation of why the standards are what they are, and being able to articulate that to my owner clients as well as why is this important in terms of specifications. So, yeah, our industry is not short on really great industry engagement opportunities.
Yeah, because I always try to educate people if they're looking for an organization, they don't necessarily have to just, as an architect, you don't necessarily have to jump to the AIA as the only thing you can do. It's, well, what are you passionate about? If your company only pays for one organization, or if you can only afford a few or one, what are the ones where your passion best aligns with it? So then you can get more involved, lead a bigger impact, and really do something with it and not just be a member. Because if you're a member of 10 of them, well, you're just a member. You're not actually
Right,
putting in as much. You don't have the time. And you also really shouldn't be like a board member on 5 of them, because then at the same time, you're going to burn yourself out. So
right, right.
it's looking up and finding the ones that your heart desires and follow your passions.
Great way of putting it. As you were saying that, I was thinking there's another one, NAWIC, which is women in construction. And what I love about that association is it gives you opportunities to get out on job sites. And so if you're at a firm where you don't have that opportunity to get out on construction sites, see things going on in progress, that could be a really great tie for you, because I think there's something so powerful about looking at things in 3 dimension during the construction process, so you can see how the drawings and the specs translate in the field and how that communication process happens.
Yeah, I always feel like you learn the best when the more active you can be doing something, the more you
Yes.
will learn from it. And so, like, if you're just doing 2D drawings, you don't see the 3D coming together, or how something's physically constructed, how a roof gets put together. You just see the section and you don't think, okay, how's somebody actually installing this? And so
Right.
sometimes you don't catch issues or errors that it's like, well, that's not
Mm-hmm.
possible. You can't get a drill there to physically put that screw in. So I know I use that as my example when I do details. It's like, how do they actually do that? Or how are they screwing the drywall in when I teach plan details for where studs go? And it's like, well, this drywall is just going to float. It's not going to do anything. So, but that took time in the field and seeing it and learning. So The more you can get in the field, the better. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question, and it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
I would say really invest in building your network. And I know that's really hard, especially when you are the youngest person in the room, when you don't know anybody when you walk into the meeting. So I would say, find that person that's standing alone, just like you are standing alone. And it'll be a little awkward, but you're both going to be glad that you did. And that's how you and I met, right? We walked outside. We were both like standing at a hotel waiting for a cab, and just casual conversation.
Yep.
So you never know who you're going to meet. And one thing that I wish I started doing earlier in my career was being intentional with connecting with people on LinkedIn. And so I think I did this with you because I try to be really good about it now. Caitlin, it was great to meet you at the AIA Women's Leadership Summit. So that way, when 2 years go by and I haven't heard from you, and all of a sudden we get reconnected, I remember where we met. And I remember when and how our relationship started. And that becomes, that's important information to have. So just making those just little connections like that helps and goes a long way. But I would also say getting involved. We talked about the industry associations. Seriously, volunteer, whether it's in your company or external. It makes the industry a lot more fun, a lot more rewarding, and it's going to create those opportunities that you really never saw coming. I mean, my career is a perfect example that would have never happened without, my industry engagement. And don't be afraid to ask questions. You are not supposed to know everything. I'm not supposed to know everything. I still ask a lot of questions after over 25 years in the industry. So
yeah, even as an industry expert now, you still have questions.
I probably have more questions now than I did then.
Yeah. No, but definitely going after somebody else in the room that's not talking to somebody. I know that's how I approached the Women's Leadership Summit in that way. I know when we met, it was literally pouring rain in Boston, and I was just debating if I felt like going all the way across to, I think it was HOK's office or something for their happy hour. And I was like, oh, it's so gross. Ran into somebody from Pittsburgh that I actually knew, talking to them. And then you were right there like, oh, I have a cab coming. Just come with us
Nice.
and can enjoy. And we got a fantastic cab ride. We even happened to be on the same dinner group to go get dinner with. So it was just all very small world, and you never know. And now I've been connected to the Women in Roofing group and other people that I have met and talked to through just that happenstance of, okay, I'm going to go outside and see how bad it's raining, was the thought that ran through my head leaving my hotel room, and turned into so many different opportunities. And so it's just getting out there and talking to people, and you never know what's going to happen.
Yes, so true. Well,
And
I'm
so
glad we got the chance to talk.
Yeah, talk again and never be strangers. It's hard to keep track of everywhere you are. I may not be able to figure out what state you are in every week, but if anyone's interested in what you're doing with GIF on the building science side, or has questions on pivoting their career or specializing in building science, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Easy to find. It's just Jennifer Keegan. Or if you're looking for something a little bit more project specific, I am on the road a lot. So we have a team email address, buildingscience@gif.com, and that reaches the entire team. And we will get back to you in short term and make sure that you're connected with the right people to get the information you need. So, but
yeah, that's really smart to have it that way.
Yeah. It has worked out so very well to have that work that way. So, and because we all came to the table with different backgrounds and different expertise. So it works really great because you might come in with a very specific question on a project that's, in Denver. And so the person, Erin is in that area. So she would maybe respond because she's in Denver. But if it has something to do with, an expertise that Mike has, even though he's not in that area, he'd be like, oh, no, I've got this one because like I've worked on a project just like this, and Caitlin, here's what you need to know. So you kind of get the benefit of our collective expertise by going that approach.
Yeah, and you can learn more about everybody's expertise and what they've done, because if somebody else is saying, hey, I got this, then you learned, okay, Mike actually knows what he's doing with that detail. So if somebody does ask you a direct question, you're like, oh, I know the person to go contact.
Yes, so, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking the time to speak with me today. It was so good to catch up.
Thank you for the opportunity. This was so much fun. And I am so impressed with your dual life here and all you're doing. And I don't know, you're like the Energizer Bunny. I'm not sure how you do it, but thank you. There's such value in what you're doing, and it's a gift that you're giving back to your peer group. So keep it up, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.